Hello, everyone. This is Carolyn Coleman. Happy New Year to everyone. 2025. I welcome you all. Thank you for listening. We have Mr. Charlie Jones, and he is an author, and we met at an author expo. So, in true Carolyn's form, we have inspirational scripture. And we're going to let him introduce himself, and then we will get started from there. Um, there's nothing like starting the new year off right. And that's what we're going to do. Um, so he told me he has had a great year so far, starting out. We love that. Um, and from First Peter 2 and 16, live as free men. Do not use your freedom to cover up for evil. Live as servants of God. So, Mr. Jones, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you can tell us about your book.
Okay, my name is Charlie Jones. I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I come from a family of gardeners, and that is something that carried on with me, although I have a master's degree in social work and I was in independent practice for several years. And I was married for 30 years. But gardening was always something that I always enjoyed. And it seemed to carry me through the hard times, bad times, and it seems like that I could always find a comfort zone in my gardening. And so after I retired as a marriage therapist, and I also was in case management and so forth, I spent a lot of time in my garden. And during that time, uh, things got kind of rocky in my marriage. So I had sort of achieved my educational goals, but there was something missing. Now, I need to give you a little bit more about my background with my parents. They were farmers. We gardened every day. And mom and dad, they had an interesting thing that they had us to do. To prepare us for life, they made us learn Bible verses. We had to memorize these Bible verses, especially mom. And she would assign us like to one person. It was seven of us. She would give 25 verses. You had to learn the Bible, the scriptures, and the words. And she would give you 25, 30. And at her time, she would say, we're going to go over those Bible verses.
Mhm.
But her way of saying going over the Bible verses was meant that she would give you the chapter and verse and you tell her the verse, or vice versa.
Okay,
They believed in to spare the rod was to spoil the child.
sure.
You had a lot of pressure on you. And so seven of us, she would give one person 10, another 25, but she would always give me 50, 100. But I took pride in that because I had a good memory back in those days.
Okay.
And so she would gather us around, and the little switches would be over on the bread there on the bed. And we would memorize and we would quote the scriptures and all those things. Now, in addition to that, we had to do our farming and we had to make good grades in school. But she didn't seem to expect, she gave us according to what she thought we could do. But there was always pressure. And so I got my education successful. Let me say that I went into chemistry and wound up being a clinical social worker. So this kind of tells you where I was in my life story in a young age.
Mhm.
I was 21 and I finally got introduced to life to some degree. So I got married. I chased the what you would call the perfect wife, uh, 2.5 kids, and a picket fence. That's what I chased all my life. But somewhere along the way, after over 20 years of marriage, I started having marital issues. Although I was a marital counselor most of the time. And so During that time, I continued with the gardening and so forth as my problems mounted. And it came a time where things just wasn't working out. And so I was really confused because the therapeutic techniques that I told others to do were not necessarily working for me.
Okay.
And so I still spend that time in the garden, still chopping. And I thought that was displacing negative energy and all those other terms that you learned as a therapist. So in the end, I got so far down till my sisters and brothers would always tell me things like, trust God, have faith in God, and those kind of things. But my mom had already told us all of those things. But I was in a situation to where those things were not working for me. I needed something like something tangible, something that would, I needed some relief. And so something happened that was really miraculous while I was working in my garden. I worked in my garden, and one day I was coming back from my garden, and we had a place there where there were concrete where you had your barbecue grill and so forth. And I was coming back, and there was a little plant growing, but it was growing between the crack of the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really just fascinating. I said, look at that thing there, it's growing. And so a few days or a few weeks later, it continued to grow. And so I put a tomato cage around it because I thought that was really fascinating. And I took pictures of it. And I would go out, when it was raining, I would take pictures of it like it was a model or something. But I was still in pain. I would take these pictures to my sisters and brothers' home, and they was telling me about trust God, those kind of things, those little cliches we hear about all the time. And I would distract them by showing them the pictures. I said, look at this. This thing continues to grow despite the circumstances that it's under. And so one night, I was studying my Bible, and I was really in a bad place. And I had accumulated all of these pictures of the same okra that was growing between the crack and the concrete. And I had going through my pity party like I did because my relationship was not working. And so I took my stuff, flipping through the photographs, and something miraculous happened. The Bible verses that my mom instilled in me that I memorized came alive through the photographs. Here was an okra that between the crack of the concrete, who which shouldn't even be there. Because I'm saying, how did just one okra, why, if I had okra, why did just one grow? And then I start looking, why does the okra change shapes? Why is it so prosperous in spite of the circumstances that it's under? Why is it that it doesn't require me to water it or to do anything for it, but it just continues to grow? And in that moment, as I flipped through those photographs, the Bible verses became real
Mm-hmm.
through the essence of the okra.
Okay.
And so what happened was this. I could take a still photograph and I could quote a Bible verse. I could quote and I could go to the next and quote another Bible verse. What I found that happened was that mom was actually sowing the seed in my life that would become fruitful when the heart was ready to receive the seed. That's what would happen. And
Okay.
as I looked through those photographs, I would say, oh my God, I can see the invisible. As I would say that, a scripture came to my mind. It was Romans 1:20.
Mm-hmm.
The invisible attributes of God are clearly seen through the things that are made, even his power and glory attributes. for they're without an excuse. Now, that was the impetus for writing the garden love story. What I realized one day while I was out in my garden, that vegetables and marriage have a lot in common. Like vegetables have physical characteristics and nutrients. Humans have physical characteristics and varying personalities. Vegetables provide nutrients to the human body. Now, a marriage are two human bodies that require nutrients from vegetables. A body without nutrients will become diseased. When the nutrients inside a vegetable decline, the vegetables start to wither. A marriage requires spiritual nutrients, love, trust, and faith. A marriage without spiritual nutrients becomes unhappy and will start to wither. So I think what happened to me on that day in my garden was that I had a counseling session with my vegetables. So in the end of this, that was the inspiration for the garden love story. As I
Okay.
analyzed all of this information that was going through my mind, the question came, what if vegetables were humans? How would a vegetable know who to marry? Now that comes from the thought of Adam and Eve was in the Garden of Eden. That was the very first wedding in the Garden of Eden. Let's say if you took Adam and Eve out of it, everything would still be indeed very good. But how would a vegetable know who to marry? Now, there's a parable in the Bible that says, I am the vine, you are the branches. But that parable also is relevant to human beings. You have to abide in the vine because we're the branches. The vine gets all of its nutrients through the root, through the vine, and then through the branches. And the branches bring forth fruit, which is what a marriage is supposed to do. So as I looked over my garden, I was looking at the garden in terms of human beings, and I spotted one of my cabbages. And I would say to myself, I'm going to make the cabbage. And this is inspirational because I couldn't have, I was doing marriage therapy for human all of these years, but now I'm in the garden. So I named this cabbage Daisy, which is sort of like a flower, kind of like a vegetable being named after a vegetable being named after a flower.
Sure.
And then I looked at the other vegetables in the garden. And then I said, suppose this garden was owned by Godfather Goodson. And that's synonymous with God the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking at, suppose Godfather Goodson owned the garden and there was Grace Goodson. That's Jesus through his son. That's God through his son Jesus, which is grace. So and then there's a cabbage head is a person who, male or female, who lacks spiritual discernment or spiritual understanding of the word of God. The first thing that she would need to do is first make a connection. He or she would need to do was to make a connection and have a strong relationship with Godfather Goodson. That's the only way that she could choose the right mate for her.
Sure.
And so from there, I start to say, let's say now, who is going to court Daisy Cabbage Head? And one of the first characters she's run into, because she's young, she doesn't know much. She's been raised the lust of the flesh, deceitfulness of riches. By the way, her mom is called Bonnie Cabbage Head, and her dad is Clyde Cabbage Head, which is a reference to Bonnie and Clyde. So she's
Oh.
already kind of like in a childhood of what you would call gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
But but their relationship, Bonnie and Clyde's relationship, have lasted over 15, 20 years. So now Daisy's in the garden and she's going to meet all of these potential suitors. These are suitors who come into her and they want to date her. But she's looking for a person, a vegetable that she can marry. And so one of the first vegetables that she meets is Mr. Corn. And just give you a synopsis of what he's like. He's tall, dark, and handsome, like a corn stalk. He has a tassel, which means he's well educated. He comes from a college called Cornell University. He has two attachments to his side, just like a cornstalk would. And Daisy analyzes him, and what she finds out is that he's very intelligent, but sometimes when he reaches to his side and drinks some of his nutritional drink, he becomes kind of oblivious, which is a reference to corn whiskey, if you would say.
Wow.
And so what the thing about it is that each character has flaws. He's educated, has attachments to his children, has other attachments, and he's he wants to be known as intelligent, but after he drinks from his nutritional attachments, he become oblivious. And so the parable, I attached a parable or scripture to him saying, basically, even a fool is wise when he pretty much keeps his mouth shut. And so what I did was each character, I showed their vulnerabilities despite their education or their achievements. Now, the next she meets Mr. Cucumber. Mr. Cucumber is long and strong. He's a climber. If you know anything about gardeners, the cucumber runs. He has a nice blossom. And so his issue is that he he climbs the trestles, he puts out fires for female veggies in the garden. But the next day he finds himself caught in a pickle because of their boyfriends.
Wow.
Now you go to the next character. His name is Mr. Onion. Mr. Onion always has a sad song. He's looking for love in empty spaces. Now, his issue is that he always comes to a female vegetable when he's trying to court them, and he's got a sad song. Everybody's done him wrong. The thing about him is that once he gets the female veggie's empathy, he drops to one knee and places an onion ring on their finger. Most of the female veggies have a allergic reaction to him. So Daisy goes through this process with Mr. Corn, Mr. Cucumber, Mr. Onion, Mr. Zucchini, and there's one other, Mr. Squash. Now, these are characteristics from human beings that I'm putting onto the vegetables. I'm using metaphors, double word meanings to bring out a point. Now, Mr. Squash, he's a crookneck. Crookneck squash. He can only see he can
Yes.
only see a story. He can only see something from one side because
Mm.
his neck is crooked. Now, what Daisy is trying to do is how would this translate into a marriage? But the thing about Mr. Crookneck Squash is this: he's a politician, and she's very impressed with him because he can say a lot. He can say a lot with a few words and say nothing with a whole lot of words. And he's running for the president of Fieldtown. Fieldtown is where they live, where all the veggies live in the field. And so she talks with him, and she's very impressed. She thinks about she's going to be the first lady of Fieldtown once he becomes president of Fieldtown. But she learns that he is related to the pumpkin family. And he can present himself as a vegetable. He's actually a fruit. A
Hmm.
squash is actually a fruit, but they have overlapping characteristics. And he's a politician. So her problem with him is that he's been presenting himself as a veggie when he's actually a fruit. So she wants to know what party is he in anyway. So then when she finds out that he's related to the pumpkins, she's upset because uh, pumpkins have a tendency, a dominant gene for obesity. And so then she starts to wonder in a relationship with Mr. Squash, how can she trust him? And she started thinking about their kids. How would he? She wonders about how can he take the kids to school if it's how can he drive the kids to school if his neck is in one direction? So she comes up with some interesting issues with him. So in the end, all of her dreams of being the first lady of Fieldtown were squashed. And so it's a very corny book, double word meanings, metaphors, and so forth. But in the end, what she finds out is that her problem is not with the suitors. The problem is with her relationship with Godfather Goodson. The first thing she needs to do is to establish a personal relationship with Godfather Goodson. Then rely on him to help her make a good decision. Now, this decision is not going to be based upon the lust of the flesh, the deceitfulness of riches, whether you're a politician and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be based upon her relationship with him. Now, a marriage, even a failed marriage, can bring a person closer to a relationship with God. Even if you go back like with Gomer and Hosea and something, God has a way of bringing you closer to him. So the book actually combines a fairy tale, goes fairy tale initially, and then it goes into a series where she has to be broken. Disappointment breaks you because none of those suitors actually met up to her standard. But the problem was not in the suitors, it was in her personal relationship with the Lord. And even in the book, it goes on that where she gets to the point where she wants to climb a beanstalk to heaven and find her true love because she just messed up. And then in the end, she finds her mate. But the mate that she finds, and should I go on to who she found? Or should I just leave that? Because I've told most of the book. But she
No,
finds her mate.
yes,
Huh?
you can go on. I mean,
Okay,
this is
she
your
finds her mate,
story.
and her mate winds up being Mr. Parsley. After she'd been disappointed by Mr. Corn, Mr. Onion, Mr. Cucumber, there was a Mr. Zucchini, and there were several others. She's been disappointed by all of those, and she's reached a state of brokenness where the words of her mom and dad, Clyde and Bonnie Cabbage Head, but they were telling her, uh, weight is all in the Lord's hand because they had been married for several years, 30 years or so. I know 30 years in garden time is a little bit different from human time. But it took her faith journey for her to realize that she needed a personal relationship with the Lord. Daisy actually analyzed her parents' relationship because they always argued with each other. Uh, Daisy Cabbage Head I mean, Clyde Cabbage Head and Bonnie Cabbage Head, which is Bonnie, analogy to Bonnie and Clyde the gangsters. They said they always argue. She said, "You're all always arguing. You're always telling me what to do, but your relationship don't seem to be working out." And Bonnie Cabbage Head would say to her husband, "I could have married Mr. Planner. He was a nut who became over the bank of Fieldtown." And so Clyde would tell her, and I mean, Bonnie would tell her that, in other words, they had contradicting, that they could have been better apart from each other. But Daisy came to a conclusion initially that they had a sour grape marriage. But through her relationship and her faith journey, she found out that they had a sauerkraut marriage. Now, sauerkraut, of course, is cabbage which has fermented.
Yes.
So a marriage that has fermented, which means basically, metaphorically, they've gone through a lot. They've gone through a lot together. They still stay together. It's better than a cabbage head marriage where you're fresh out there and trying to find your way. So in the end, she married Mr. Parsley. Mr. Parsley is not, he doesn't have the attributes of a politician. He doesn't have the length and width of a cucumber. He doesn't have the education of a Mr. Corn. But her attractiveness to him is on a spiritual level. Mr. Parsley, first of all, parsley is the name for him is rock celery. And that's kind of like a thing about Rock of Ages. He has a boisterous voice in the face of adversity. That's became her that became her attraction to him, not on the physical, not on the material, but on the spiritual. And so the book goes on to talk about they got married and they had the vegetables. They had their wedding in Italy, and they were pollinated on their wedding night, and so it gets kind of ridiculously humorous at some points in there. And they had two children. By the way, Mr. Parsley's name was uh, Elvis Curly Parsley, so reference to Elvis Presley. So he wasn't all wimp. And they invited everybody in the garden to their wedding, and they had 7 kids. So in the end, the essence of the book is what it starts out with in the beginning of the book is a vegetable, Daisy Cabbage Head, a person who lacks spiritual understanding, who is trying to find a mate, and she goes through all these traumas, and she's trying to find one based on the lust of the flesh, deceitfulness of riches, and those kind of things. And her journey is that through all the disappointment, Godfather Goodson is making her. It's kind of like the sower in the seed. He's breaking her down. He's breaking him down to where she's seeing things from a spiritual perspective through her life journey. Now, the book is gender friendly because there's a section in the book to where we talk about, suppose Mr. Daisy Cabbage Head met Miss Cucumber and vice versa. What would that relationship would be? What would that relationship be? And then it breaks down to where, let's say if Miss Cucumber married, let's say she married uh, one of the other characters in there, what would it be? So it's vice versa on the sex issue of it. But in the end, the main storyline in the book is that before you get married, you need to have an understanding of yourself. You need to ask God. Ask God for the good son to let you make the best decisions. And even with that, there's going to be some trouble. There's also a section in the book where we get to where couples in the Bible, who had problems in their marriage. We talk about David and Bathsheba. We talk about Hosea and Gomer. Then we get on down, we talk about Mary and Joseph. In other words, it's God's grace, his sovereignty, despite Despite our choices, God's will be done. And sometimes a bad marriage can give you a better relationship with the Lord. It's something that humans, you can't really understand, but you make the best choice. But if you trust Him, if you trust the Lord, if you're willing to understand yourself and know that you're not perfect, because we can't judge, we're all sinners, and and God would direct you and tell you what you need to do. And even a bad marriage can be a good thing. Just right now, I'm reading book of Hosea, and it has nothing to do with who's bad and who's this and that, but it has more to do with myself. I have been apart from Him, and so when you start seeing yourself and get out of this thing where I was in, where I went to college, I'm gonna meet the perfect woman, we're gonna have 2.5 kids, white picket fence. None of that works out. Where every movie on TV works out with the kissing at the end. Once you can get out of that frame of mind and come into a relationship, personal relationship with the Lord, then He will allow you. You gonna still have your choices, but He'll determine the outcome. And because you trust Him, then things will work out. Spiritual growth for
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Charlie. I really appreciate that. But how do you are a clinical social worker, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you help people, did you help people with their marriages or you help them with other aspects of their lives?
Well, if there was a client who had a marital issue, I relied upon my education.
Okay.
And so I was, like I said, master's degree, independent practice license. And I would teach them the techniques because when you're dealing with clients, one thing they tell you about, you cannot induce. I was not at a point in my life where I had the connection with the Lord. So when I did my therapy, you cannot impose, as they say, your beliefs on the clients. You have to kind of let them lead you as to what they want. Now, if you want to be a Christian counselor, which I was not at the time, you need to get an additional set of skills and then the client has to agree that that is the modality that they want to pursue. But most clients that I've met with, they had their issues, but that was not what they wanted to pursue. So what I did was use the standard Freudian, Algerian, whatever the issue, whatever the modality that works for them. But after I retired and in my own personal life, I found that what my mom was trying to teach me, when you was a child, you thought as a child, what she was trying to show me at that age, became real to me as I experienced life. And what she was trying to tell me and the seed that she sowed, trying to sow in my heart, she couldn't do it. She could just throw the seed out there. But it took personal experiences. It took a brokenness to where I could actually understand what she was trying to tell me. It took a personal relationship with the Lord to where I understood what was going on in my own marriage. And that's what I'm trying to say. So if I were to be a counselor now in marital or whatever the issue is, I would be a Christian counselor. But I didn't start out that the going into school and trying to get a degree. They don't necessarily offer you. There's some standard things that they offer you. At some point, you have to say, "Well, I want to be a Christian counselor," or you already have to have that in your heart. So the point with Daisy Cavity to me is that I don't know about we, but I personally started off as a cavity. I bought into what the curriculum said. But then there was something else going on with me outside the curriculum. Now, I still have my counseling license and all of that kind of thing. But at this point in my life, if I was going to do counseling, it would have to be a Christian counseling. I've gone through too much personally, and the Lord has brought me from too far up to where I am now until that would be the only thing because there's a comfort in what you're going through if you trust. Now, in this book that I have here, has a section in their book that's called Parables and Pictures. And in that section of the book, I talk about how, in my own personal relationship, that this okra grew between the crack of the concrete when I was going through, believe it or not, marital problems, and how that okra, it actually was God's revelation to me. It was His way of getting connected to me. It's sort of like, I guess the best example I can give is like, it's kind of like Moses at the burning bush. He was in the desert, there was a bush burning, and it's nothing strange about bushes burning in the desert in the sun. But the strange thing about it was that it was not consumed. And in the same way, not comparing myself to Moses, was there's an okra in the concrete that I didn't put there. And what is it doing there? How did it get there? Why does it prosper? Now, in my personal relationship, in my marriage, I projected after I went through my own relationship, my own situation to the okra. It changed, it grew in the same difficult spot. It flourished. And I was going out to my garden, and my little okra there was falling over at the top. And I say, when I went through the experience, like, that's me. I'm the okra. I can overcome. I can do all things through Christ anyway, who strengthened me. And so now I write books about cabbages. I write books about the first book I wrote about my personal story. And in that book is those pictures in both books. But I didn't know what was happening to me. I knew what was happening to me in the flesh. But there was something going on with me in the spirit. And once the spirit took over, then I knew that whatever comes towards me, I can handle it. It's a breakdown when you're in the desert with Moses. It was a breakdown from when he went from there. When he left out of Egypt, when he left and they put him out in the desert, there's a breakdown. There's a breakdown with Jonah in the belly of the whale. There's a breakdown with Peter when that chicken crowed 3 times. The chicken crows all the time at 5 o'clock in the evening, but that time was for him. So there's a personal thing that God uses in nature to teach a man. He teaches humans through nature because nature declares his glory. And when Cain and Abel, I'm getting a little bit off the topic, when Cain killed Abel, the ground cried out. Wasn't no witnesses, but the ground cried out for justice. So anyway, I'm about to get off topic now because I kind of do that sometimes.
Well,
But
that's okay. I mean, one thought leads into another.
mhm,
So this is a garden love story, a
mhm.
parable of faith journey to marriage.
Yes,
Now,
and
tell us
yes,
about your first book.
my first book is my personal book. It's called Growing a Successful Marriage Through Faith. Now, this is a book that I wrote when I was actually in a good situation with my spouse, and she read it, most of it, and she actually read the outline of the Garden Love Story book. But I didn't know at the time that the Lord was preparing me for something, for the storm that was about to pursue. I've been married just about 29 years, still on my honeymoon. But the point about it, I'm trying to say, I didn't know that the Lord was preparing me for something. She read, and but I didn't know the ending. And then she read the outline of the Garden Love story, which we both laughed together about how corny and however it is. But I didn't know that the Lord was preparing me for what I was going to go through. So I finished the Garden Love story, which was it starts off like me and my wife to be, we went to high school together. Uh, we graduated the same year, 75. We never dated. 10 years later, we went on the we were on our the 10th year high school reunion, and we re-met. But there was a lot of life between us. There was a lot of life between high school from where she was and high school where I was. So we met, and that talks about basically um, we met. We both dealing with issues. We're both dealing with issues in life. My mom had died and had a relationship, and that had gone, and she had been a divorce, and so those two factors, chaos is what I would say, grew us, brought us together because we knew in high school in the 12th grade we were good people. But life has a tendency where when you go this way and this way, and then you come back together, a lot of things can bring you together. It's not always good things. Two people can rob a bank together, but once they get outside the bank, one in Vegas and the other floundered. The point I'm trying to say is that the Lord has a way of bringing people together, or you make your choices, and it's not may not be the best choice, but sometimes the choice that happens that you make brings you close to Him, and it's not a one-sided thing. Maybe she became closer to Him also. So sometimes the Lord has a way. Oh, that's a proverb say, men make choices, God determine outcomes.
Mm.
And when you pray in the Lord's prayer, the one that said Lord pray, you say, "Thy will be done." And so from that perspective, we love. I think we love each other on a certain level, but sometimes we can love each other on a survival level, which is not necessarily a spiritual level. So anyway, that saying that led me into the Garden Love Story book, where Daisy could actually have married any one of those characters. But what's going to allow her to survive is her personal relationship with the Lord. It's just because the personal is your focus is on Him. You trust Him. You ask Him. You cry out to Him. That's what's going to get you through this life, not your education, not your whatever you told other people. It's like Nicodemus. Nicodemus went to school and he went to Jesus, and Jesus told him, "Are you a ruler of the Jews and know not these things?" It's a wonderful thing when you develop a personal, I'm not talking about the pastors in the church, personal.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes personal, you can listen to whoever you want to listen to, but you know what He done for you, what He brought you through. You trust Him. You know what love is. He loves. You can't find that kind of love in a human being.
No, it's just like
But you can find in our you can find in some nice soul records.
that's true, and it's similar, or it is a testimony.
It's a
No one can
testimony.
tell your testimony like you can. They can
Yes,
try to repeat it,
yeah,
but it's so personal, they won't be able to describe it, or the emotions won't be evoked unless
yeah,
you tell your own testimony. Yeah, I tell
Absolutely.
people, I said, let me give you a little piece of this testimony I heard today, because I can't tell it like she told it or like he told it, but let me just give you just a little nugget from the testimony.
Hmm.
You can repeat it, but it's not going to have that same strength behind it.
Yeah, but you can get a couple of people together though. I'm talking about, we get lost up in cliches and stuff, but this is what I call them Christian peoples. When they can share the same story. When you take a Paul and put him with a Peter, you can put him with a Thomas now. He was one of them too. When you
Sure.
can when you can take them and they know that it all, let me put it this way, the 12 disciples were disciples, but only after the Lord went to the cross that they actually had the same story. And so you can be, let me say, if you go back to Adam and Eve, let's go back to the Garden of Eden. They were one flesh, but they were not spiritual until they were bonded. They never got that far with the Spirit of God through trust in Him. That's where that old devil sneaked in at there and messed that part up. And in the same way, the 12 disciples, you said, well, Thomas doubted him, and we all a little bit of Thomas, but God brings us all together to Him. And He does that nationwide, first to the Israel and then to the Gentiles. But then the Gentiles accepted Jesus before Israel. The point about it, we all have fallen short of the glory of God. And once you meet a person and you put your focus on Him, he said, putting out your trust in the point about once you put your focus on Him, then and you feel like and God leads you, but God ain't gonna lead you wrong. Whatever you do and whatever choice you make, it's gonna grow you. You have to break up ground in order to plant a seed.
That's true.
I mean, God said, He said, this is my body, which is broken for you. That's Jesus saying that. You breaking your body for me? So anyway, I got these photographs in big large pictures with the scriptures on them as the Lord revealed it to me when I was going through what I was going through. They are big pictures. I call them parables in pictures.
Okay.
And you can put those pictures together and you can see most people, depending on how the Lord Spirit works, you can see your life story in it. I got three pictures. One they call Between a Rock and a Hard Place, got that okra in one
Okay.
stage. I got one called Oasis, which is that okra. It's a little older, but it's in the concrete, but there's water on it. Oasis. And I got another one which is in the concrete, but nothing but buds, nothing but flowers on it. So caught between a rock and a hard place. God is able to provide all your needs. Oasis basically says in hard time, God will provide the rain. And you got by faith. By faith. And I studied that scripture by faith. By faith is about nothing that you can do yourself humanly. That by faith is something that's invisible, that only God knows what it is. You can't present something to Him unless you believe that. That's what the by faith is, the belief that He is able. The belief is, the by faith is, I believe that you are able to. So I have this photograph exhibit that I call Parables in Pictures. And I would group, most people can find their own life story in their circumstances in their life because we all are sinners. We all have fallen short of the glory of God, and there's only one true, and that's Him. So I got all these pictures with the scriptures on them that I got from my experience. And another person, I can hand that to another person. They say, "Oh, well, I see it this way, but it's that okra. It's that okra in the concrete." I had one person tell me, say, I showed him and say, he asked me, he said, I said, "Look here, let me show you this a picture." He said, "Oh man, how how you grow marijuana that way?" That was his. Now let me tell you how I equate that to. You ever heard of that Rorschach test or ink blot test?
Yes.
Have you ever looked up in the clouds there and somebody said that's a bird? The other person said that's a missile. It's more of a reflection of where you come from or how you see things. So I have all these pictures from those okra pictures, which how God revealed to me through those pictures. And with those pictures, I can show the wilderness story through three pictures. Moses in the wilderness, caught between a rock and a hard place, which is basically the children of Israel leaving Egypt, caught between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. Oasis, where they was needing water, and Moses smoked the stone, and water turned come out of it, and by faith. And that's the hard one there, because by faith is a picture, which means that lest any man should boast.
Mm.
You just take by faith and put lest any man should boast. That's the rest of the script. The rest of the scripture, you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay, lest any man should boast. And you go way back to Cain and Abel. You say Cain presented a sacrifice, and Abel presented a sacrifice, lest any man should boast. What is the difference? The heart, sowing the seed. Somebody trying to get over, somebody ain't being upfront. He that comes before the Lord must believe that he is. You must believe him at his word. Anyway, I don't want to get into no sermon here, but if you don't believe that he's able, then go back.
Well, at
Hmm?
some point in time, you're going to have to trust him.
You're
Go
gonna have
back.
to trust him. You're gonna let me just say one more thing. Here, Pharaoh, he broke him down. When Moses had a little issues. He said, "How am I gonna do this, Lord? How am I gonna do that?" Pharaoh had put first of all, Moses went on a basket. They put him in a basket. It's kind of like a comedy thing. He put him in the basket. The parents did. He went to Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh was killing up all them kids. He raised in Pharaoh's house. But there came a time, it was his season, where he didn't like that they was how they were treating the Hebrews. He found out he was a Hebrew. He killed the Egyptian, hid him in the sand. He threw him out. He went across the desert. He found out there was a burning bush. You know, they could have killed that man instantly, but God sent him out there in that desert. He went out there. He met Jesus, God, on a burning bush. God sent him back. Oh, they could have killed him instantly on his way back. He's letting my people go. That's an amazing thing. His personal relationship is we met him in that burning bush. But the burning bush represented something. It represented the burning of him being a Hebrew and an Egyptian, and how can he reconcile that kind of thing? Anyway, what I'm trying to say, there's a personal journey for every individual. It may not be, mine may be different from yours, but it goes back to Jesus Christ. And once you accept it, then, because that's the flesh is always beating up on the spirit, and they always warring against each other. But once you accept it, and then you know. And so that's a Jonah. That's a God man too. He went the wrong way. It's a thing in that Bible where they always went the wrong way. 99% of the time they went the wrong way. Oh, Paul, I don't even know how he got in there. He was killing the Christians. Oh, Thomas, lest any man should boast. And then
Yeah.
Jesus say, God said, how many sheep have you lost? He said, no, not one. And those I have, which is not of my fold, then I must bring. So there's hope for all. But getting back to the book here, it's a little personal space for me, and it's a message for people who are getting married. Now, you got to realize now today you got dating apps, and you may get Freddy Krueger from that, but Freddy Krueger could be whatever. But the point I'm trying to say is you got all these kind of things, but it starts off, it's a personal relationship with the Lord in which He grow you through your experience. And it ain't no bad guys, it ain't no good guys, it's just sinners. But once He grow you and you know Him and you depend on Him, and you've been boiled down, then you're ready to be used. And this book, and I always say this, I have never, not in no, I've never seen anybody even attempt to write a parable. Maybe there is somebody, but this book, it 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 gives a fairy tale. It gives humans. First of all, it gives vegetables human characteristics because everything He made was good, humans and the vegetables. It gives vegetables human characteristics, and you find out that all belong to the Lord. And when Jesus came to the earth, He used mustard seeds, wheat, tares. He used those things in the garden to teach human beings in the New Testament. The tribe of the Levites, they was wondering who's going to be he said, the burden or the rod. God used Joseph. There's some strange writing on the wall. He talked about cows. He talked about, isn't that something? But the man of God could interpret them. That's a wonderful thing. The earth declares His glory. But man, if he gonna take a coin and make it into a bomb by his own wisdom. So anyway, I get off track there, but God put man and woman in the Garden of Eden for a reason. Because the Garden of Eden was the perfect place where they could grow. And God gave them the opportunity to have the seed of faith planted into their hearts. So anyway, I get off on my little tangent there, but it's a wonderful thing to me when you grow and come to understand the Lord yourself. And when you get away from them Dick's, I don't know, you may not be my age, but Dick, Jane, and Sally, LMM movies, Young and the Restless, everybody kiss at the end of the movie. God is a God of spirituality. Now the world's got its own thing going on. But once you reach a point in your life where you've been through enough and that heart has been pricked and that seed of faith grows in your heart, you got something going on. You face each challenge with a focus on Him.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I do appreciate your time and you going over both of your books. Um, how long have you been writing?
Look, relatively young at writing. This is just my second book, and I'm still learning the art of writing. And if you would ask the editors who had to edit my books, they wouldn't say not that long. But but I write from my heart, and the Lord continues to help me, and but not really not that long. I only started writing maybe about 2 or 3 years
And that's
after.
fine.
Hmm.
What I'm trying to get to, there's always a time.
Hmm.
You're never too late until you
Hmm.
don't. So
Hmm.
it's never too late to start writing your book, working on your degree, whatever you want to do in life, whatever you want to accomplish in life, you can do it. The thing is to get started with it. It just may help encourage someone else.
But you know where I'm at it now? I have 40, maybe about 45 photographs from the okra, and the Lord has blessed me where I have a picture called Unequal Yoke. do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And I have the ox in the ass, and I have the buzzard with the eagle, and the turtle with the rabbit. He has expanded my understanding beyond just the okra.
Sure.
I asked the Lord, and when I was going through my troubles, I asked him. I didn't really ask him. Think I was just down. I said, Lord, I need to see faith. And that is when you get boiled down enough in life. What I mean by boiled down, when you're at your lowest, like that woman with the hemorrhage, and she would say she's something really ridiculous, which in a human sense, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, and she was so not even able to get there to touch it, because when you get to the point where you are at a place where you can't get back from, and I asked the Lord something totally ridiculous, and I've been to church a whole lot of group of times. I say I need to see faith, and I don't know what I was wanting him to do. I don't know what the faith would look like, a woman or a horse or what. But people was telling me, have faith, trust God. And I'm trying to tell these people I need something tangible. And so uh, when I got to that point, and that's when he took me back to the garden, back where mama, where daddy, where we digging sweet potatoes and stuff. He showed me something that was relevant to me. It wasn't no Freudian psychobabble. It was something that I had seen before and something that I knew in my mind that it wasn't necessarily, it was, I'd never seen before. That means it wasn't impossible, but